If you've been watching A Day in History for a while, you know it can get pretty dark. Well, get ready because it's about to get darker. Today, on A Day in History, China's Battle of Guangxi, China's darkest secret. In China today, and for many years, the great proletarian cultural revolution and the events surrounding it have been a hushed topic. Most people know it exists, but most rarely talk about it. Those old enough to have some grasp of the times are passing away. But the people who ran China from 1966 to 1968 remember, because they were teenagers then. Yep, to put it simply, big chunks of China were run by children. Armed children. Sometimes with small arms, other times with tanks and artillery. The excesses of the Red Guards, the young people usually between 13 and around 22, who saw themselves as Chairman Mao's revolutionary vanguard, are well known. Book burnings, turning on your neighbor before he could turn on you, beatings, round-the-clock calisthenics, confessions, torture, threats, and sometimes execution. But there is one incident so difficult to fathom and so horrible that not only is it rarely discussed in China, but many people don't even know it happened. And for those that do, silence is a wise choice. 58 years later, the Chinese communists don't like to admit mistakes. And when the mistake happened under the guiding eye of the great helmsman, as Mao was often known, then it didn't happen, understand? Most people outside China have never heard of the Battle of Guangxi, and what made it so uniquely horrible. Many people would say, why care about a very indecisive battle in China nearly 60 years ago? Well, the world is not exactly becoming a nicer place at the moment. It pays to know what causes incidents like this and so many other horrors. And that idea of preserving knowledge so we don't repeat the worst of ourselves is actually why today's sponsor feels so relevant. Hungry Minds, an international creative group of artists, scientists, architects, designers, and entrepreneurs, made The Book, the ultimate guide to rebuilding a civilization. 400-plus pages, 180 topics, 23 chapters of humanity's greatest inventions and discoveries. A blend of history, science, art, and design built by over 50 professionals. It raised $2.3 million on Kickstarter and became a bestseller in 2023. And when you hold it, you understand why. The art caught me off guard. I never thought a diagram of water purification could be beautiful. There's a weight to every illustration. Like the knowledge itself is old and the art is honoring it. I've spent years researching how societies collapse and what it takes to rebuild them. This book covers all of that in a way that actually surprised me. If you like going down rabbit holes, this one doesn't end. The book has layers. On the surface, it's this beautiful encyclopedia. Go a little deeper and you start spotting pop culture Easter eggs hidden in the illustrations. Go deeper still and you find actual puzzles with codes, ciphers, and symbols woven into the pages. Some are marked with butterflies. Those are your entry-level clues. Solve enough and they lead you to a secret website. But finding the website is just finding the door. Beyond that are advanced puzzles that are way harder, and only 7 people in the entire world have cracked the whole thing. Do that and you get a real reward from Hungry Minds, and become part of something called the Order of Seekers. I sat down to flip through it. Next thing I know, it's 2 a.m. and I'm matching symbols across pages, trying to figure out why a butterfly keeps showing up next to specific letters. You don't read this book, you fall into it. Check the link in the description, use code ADayInHistory10, QR code is on screen right now. Now, you want to try to make sense of the Cultural Revolution? Well, you're going to learn more about the why in a minute. But for now, listen to this. One of the most common things that occurred during the revolution was that groups of Red Guards attempted to outdo each other in showing off revolutionary zeal. and living up to the ideals in Chairman Mao's collection of sayings and speeches, known as the Little Red Book. In Beijing, some Red Guard groups went out and turned all the traffic lights upside down. Why? Because by their logic, red was the color of communism and the future. Green was the color of money, of capitalism. And capitalism was the enemy. In several cities, this idea was actually put into practice. They did it overnight. Accidents galore, pedestrian fatalities, and more began to occur more and more often. Finally, Vice Premier Zhou Enlai, sometimes even more popular than Mao, stepped in and ordered all the lights put back correctly. It took the second most powerful man in nuclear power to put a stop to the nonsense. It wasn't until after Mao died in 1976 that most people knew about what had happened during his infamous Great Leap Forward from 1958 to 62. Before Mao's messed up plan for a cultural revolution, he had a messed up plan called the Great Leap Forward, which likely set the country back 10 or more years. In the late 50s, early 60s, Mao and the Soviet Union began to drift apart. As a matter of fact, Communist China and the Soviet Union fought a border war in the late 1960s that cost thousands of lives. For over a decade, the Soviet Union had helped Mao with farm equipment, new agricultural technologies, and advisors. By late 1958, Mao was getting impatient. The Communist Party's policies weren't working, and there was widespread disaffection. Still though, the Chinese Civil War and World War II had only ended a decade or so before, and for many people, at least in the east of the country, things got a little better until they didn't. Floods, locust plagues, drought, erosion, poor farming practices, and more put pressure on the government, which wanted to focus first on heavy industry. The Great Leap was a program of collectivization and mass mobilization. In 1960, China's population was 667 million people. The communists could mobilize hundreds of thousands of people or more in just a day or two. One of the problems facing China at the time was an overpopulation of sparrows. It sounds silly until you realize that many, if not most farms in China at the time were poor, and grain storage was inadequate or non-existent. Even with protection, a swarm of millions of swallows can tear through a field of wheat very quickly. What was the government's answer? The entire able-bodied Chinese population, including children and the elderly, was to bang pots together to keep the sparrows in the air, until they fell and died. And you know what? It worked. So many sparrows died that the insects they also ate multiplied astronomically. Famine started almost right away. They did the same thing with rats, which of course spread disease. Lots of rats died, lots of snakes moved in. It was an absolute miracle of planning. China's farmers and steelworkers and miners and on all had their government set quotas to deliver. At this time, as in Stalin's USSR in the 1930s, it was not a good idea to fall short of a quota, so people lied. When government officials arrived to investigate, grain trucks were driven in large circles, returning to the inspectors a couple of times. Obviously, there was enough grain. At least that's what Mao thought, and like Hitler, no one was willing to say, "Comrade Chairman, this is a terrible idea. Chinese prisons are nowhere you want to be, and odds are you wouldn't be in prison long." In the end, an estimated 45 million people died during the Great Leap, more than the population of the state of California. When people in the government, especially Mao's foes, and there were plenty, realized how bad things had become, a successful push was also made to sideline Mao. He kept some positions, but was also given many honors and spent much time in his own personal complex in Beijing. But by 1965 to 66, things hadn't improved much in China. and Mao was still popular with most people. With threats and deft political maneuvering, Mao put himself in a better position, because he launched the Cultural Revolution with a call for China's young people to destroy the Four Olds. So literally in their millions, Red Guards went out to do just as Mao commanded, at least what they thought he had commanded. The Four Olds were old customs, culture, habits, and ideas. In addition to the people who held onto the old ways, the people of Communist China were told that the country was full of capitalist roaders, people who followed the capitalist road. Sometimes they were running dogs of the imperialists. There were a lot of them. Communism had its own language. In every city, town, and many villages, young people went looking to root out the Four Olds, that landlord, class enemy that kept people oppressed for years. Old buildings were demolished, especially those that had been part of the Imperial Chinese government. Students were proud to have cleared their neighborhoods of capitalist roaders and defended them from other Red Guard units they believed were deluded. These groups could sometimes number in the hundreds or more. Often, they overran police stations or even militia camps, believing that since they, the Red Guard, were the revolutionary vanguard that was changing China, the police and the militia were old. Now, most Red Guards weren't attacking police units, but they were definitely controlling them, at least to some extent. What if the fire department saved the home and family of an enemy of the people? Then all of a sudden, you're under suspicion too. So people often denounced people before they could be attacked. However, if someone got in the habit of condemning people too much, the Red Guards would begin to think they were working to sabotage the revolution somehow. Older people were under immediate suspicion. After all, they had grown up before communism and were immediately under suspicion without doing anything. The primary targets were teachers, petty officials, intellectuals, writers, singers, poets, dancers, professors, etc. Family members were constantly under scrutiny, parents under their children's watch. The whole basis of society fell apart. Everything was viewed short-term, as kids will do, and that might work for a household, but not for an entire town, province, and country. Things got weird from top to bottom. Mao was content to allow the chaos to continue. He knew that despite some powerful enemies, he was still immensely popular with the people. Rallies were held that dwarfed anything the Nazis ever dreamed. At times, 1 million or more people attended rallies in Beijing, Shanghai, and other large cities. Everyone carried the Little Red Book, and being seen without one was not good at all. You instantly went on the list. Sometimes the list meant a warning, but with thousands of fired-up kids thinking and knowing they ran things, forgetting the Little Red Book could get you beaten at best and beaten to death at worst. It was never a law or even a party rule that the Little Red Book be carried, but whether you were 12, 20, or 85, you didn't want to leave the Little Red Book at home accidentally. In Beijing, Mao used the Red Guards as both a threat and as enforcers, especially outside the capital. When the Red Guards began to realize they were in almost complete control of the country, that's when the trouble started. As with different religious sects arguing what holy person said what and what they meant, Red Guard units hundreds of miles from Beijing, often without quick or reliable communications with anyone in absolute authority, took matters into their own hands. The Cultural Revolution was a time of fanaticism, and people also became fanatic about being more fanatic than the Red Guard unit down the road. That led to a lot of pain and misery. There were very few places in China where the pain and suffering were worse than in Guangxi province, about 1,800 miles south of Beijing, bordering Vietnam. In Guangxi, different Red Guard factions were fighting for control. Oftentimes, units on patrol for running dogs of the imperialists would actually be planning a sneak attack involving hundreds burning and destroying enemy territory. Like any gang war, the action went back and forth. The fighting between the two groups was sometimes coaxed one way or the other by military officials or the police. So they became involved in a very intense war in a province about the size of Oregon and Wyoming combined. By the time things got really horrible, many groups in Guangxi had access to at least some firearms, but a lot of times, weapons were homemade swords, spears, and pikes. It was bloody and primitive, and it engendered great hatred, because aside from the violence and perhaps the loss of friends, the other side was wrong. If you knew you were right and remembered these people were absolute fanatics, then everyone else is wrong. And if that's the case, letting them take over could destroy the country. So, a civil war of sorts lasted about 3 years in Guangxi, especially in Wuxian County. In Wuxian County, things got so bad that the rival factions of Red Guards, ate each other. It wasn't hunger, and it definitely wasn't tradition. So why, in the spring and summer of 1968, did rival factions of Red Guards eat one another? If it wasn't for food, then what was it for? Like everything else during the Cultural Revolution, it was political. The point was to show that you, meaning a fanatical Red Guard, and guardsmen would be wrong. There were hundreds of thousands of female Red Guards, were symbolically destroying everything they are. While people who have been in situations that have required cannibalism to survive often say that human flesh tastes like pork, meaning the thigh, ribs, etc. But the Red Guards didn't eat the muscle. They ate the organs, most often the liver. In traditional Chinese medicine, the liver is believed to be the center of the body, balancing and commanding the other organs. It's also the organ associated with courage, direction, and purpose, and that the Red Guards had in spades. By ritual consumption of the liver, you're saying, not only am I destroying you, but I am using your strength to add to mine. Was that in the mind of the Red Guards who did it? You bet it was. The first recorded killing happened in Wuxian when Red Guards stabbed and killed a man waiting for a bus. They took his liver home and cooked it. Soon, both copycat and revenge killings took place across not just Wuxian County, but throughout much of Guangxi province. Gangs of youth with rusty farm implements, rocks, and wood spears would march through an area looking not only for other Red Guards, who had names like the Chairman Mao Thought Propaganda Team and the Mao Zedong Thought Red Guards, or the Red Rebels, etc. When they found someone they believed was a class enemy, they were often beaten severely before being killed. Many times, it was not just the liver. Bodies without hearts and kidneys were found. The perpetrators took the organs home and boiled them. By the start of 1968, the Communist Party, including obviously Mao and Zhou, decided that the Red Guards needed to be disbanded. Throughout the country, the People's Liberation Army took control. Most of the time, this was peaceful. Sometimes, it was not. Either way, the Red Guards that survived, not only in Guangxi but all over China, were sent to a labor camp system called the Down to the Countryside campaign, supposedly encouraging lost youth to get healthy and get right in the head. Many Red Guards spent 2, 3, 5, or more years in the camps. When they got out, a lot of Red Guards couldn't find a place in society, and often couldn't get married. People rightly blamed them for the chaos of the middle 60s. The man they didn't blame, at least openly, was Mao. He was to blame for virtually all of it. Between 1 and 2 million people died or were killed as a direct result of the Cultural Revolution. From 1966 to 1976, when Mao died, the Cultural Revolution turned life upside down in China. But by 1976, he was a senile old man who spent most of his days eating and being massaged by young women and girls, reportedly as young as 12, hundreds of them. How many people were victims of cannibalism? No one is exactly sure. Early estimates put it close to 900. Later estimates revised that down to about 45, but it's since been revised upward again. It's now estimated that between 40 and 100 people were victims of cannibal Red Guards. 91 of them were arrested in the 1980s. The longest sentence was a life sentence, but many accused got off either scot-free or a couple of years prison time. Thank you for watching. See you next time.